Here we go.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Arey, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in episodes 1 through 3 of Andor. Now, if you've only seen the first episode, that's okay. We're going to go through the Easter eggs for that episode first, and then you can stop, take a break, go watch episode 2, and come back. We'll be waiting for you because you are amazing. Now, a lot of you are going to think that this show starts off kind of slow and it takes a while to get going, and you're not wrong. But so far, that's something I actually love about this show. It's an origin story for both Cassian Andor and for the Rebellion. These first 3 episodes really take their time showing us the day-to-day life in the galaxy, not through the eyes of a Jedi or a space pirate, but through the eyes of a poor person. These people are just like the junk all over their planet. They've all been discarded by the wealthy. See, this is the key element to forming rebellion. If the Empire treated all its citizens well and everybody earned a living wage, then there would never have been a revolution. But this series is showing us the economic underpinnings of the rebellion. It's showing us why they fight.
Well, economic underpinnings doesn't sound fun to me. Where's all the lightsabers and space wizards and pew pew pew?
You know, Doug, I'm actually super glad this is a Star Wars project with no space wizards. They're only special if they're rare.
Solid point.
High five. Maybe this show is more geared toward adults than past Star Wars projects. I mean, there is a lot of 80s tech lying around that fuels our nostalgia, but if there's room for different genres in Star Wars, and I gotta say, why not have a Star Wars show that So I'm going to go into more detail about the show's themes and explain the flashbacks a little later in the video. But first, let's go through some Easter eggs. The first Easter egg is in the title screen. Cassian's droid B2 Emo has joined the droids in the opening Star Wars title. Next, we go to the blackness of space, the great unknown. Now, at this point in history, small rebel cells are just beginning to form on different planets, who actually have no contact with one another. Each of these cells is isolated, but they're all looking out into the same darkness and wondering if there are other rebels out there like them. And then, slowly, dawn comes onto a planet. The reveal of light in the galaxy is a theme in Star Wars that keeps recurring as a symbol of hope. There's the light of the Jedi. Rey's name is Rey, like a ray of light, and Force Awakens was pretty over the top with the symbolism.
But as long as there's light, we got a chance.
Showing dawn on this world is appropriate because the series is showing us the dawn of the rebellion. And then the letters of Andor's name slowly drift together, like the different rebel bands in this galaxy, slowly forming a united military unit. This is also symbolizing how Andor himself is going to be forming his identity throughout this series. And finally, the dawn of the planet becomes a proto-Rebel Alliance symbol, because the dawn of the rebellion is a new dawn for the galaxy. You'll notice that the planet title font matches the style of Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, which is a prequel to A New Hope, and this show is a prequel to that movie. And by the way, I just want to say to everybody, thank you for supporting us and watching our Star Wars breakdowns. We're going to have a lot of fun covering this show, and if you would like to continue supporting our channel, we now have a merch store. You can buy cool exclusive shirts like this original trilogy t-shirt, and this new one that says "Not the Bees."
Not the bees! Ah!
You can find these shirts and more at shopzeroedition.com/ScreenCrush-merch, and there is a link in the description. These shirts are limited in number, so you got to get them while they're available. And we also have ScreenCrush branded t-shirts, hats, and these are all extremely good quality fabric and fit great. And look, Doug has one too.
Look at me, I am so small.
Let us know in the comments what other merch you think we should sell, and visit shopzeroedition.com/ScreenCrush-merch. Back to Andor. We open on Morlana 1. That's a corporate zone.
Yeah, and what's that mean? And hey, is there gonna be taxation of trade routes in this Star War? I don't want no taxation of trade routes.
No. Well, I mean, maybe. But look, here's what this means. When America was first being industrialized, a company would open up a factory and then in a town, and then they would kind of build the town around it. These were called company towns, where every other business, like grocery stores, bars, etc., basically existed to serve the people who worked in that factory. And we're seeing the same thing here. Morlana is a network of planets that is being ruled by this corporation. Now, the Empire supports this organization. The company pays taxes to the government, and then they supply the government with materials, but the Empire has no interest in governing the place directly. Basically, as long as the corporation makes the money and keeps people in line, the Empire feels no need to get involved. This is kind of like the relationship Cloud City had with the Empire in The Empire Strikes Back. That was a mining facility trying to keep the government from being interested in what they did.
Our operation is small enough not to be noticed.
This company has a similar arrangement that the police chiefs talk about.
Minimizing the time the Empire spends thinking about Preox Morlana benefits our superiors.
So the planet's docks are joined by these very long walkways, very reminiscent to the roads we see in Corellia in Solo, and also a lot like the pathways in Camino in the Star Wars Battlefront games. Now, we see that this is taking place 5 BBY. That's 5 years before the Battle of Yavin in A New Hope. So roughly 15 years after Revenge of the Sith and 5 years after Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Hello there.
Now, part of those company towns that I mentioned earlier also included red light districts and bars, where the factory workers could go and drink and blow off some steam. Cassian walks by several prostitutes in these bubbles, in a setup very reminiscent of cities where the oldest profession is legal, like in Amsterdam. When he entered the brothel, I immediately thought of the lighting design of Jabba's palace, with the red glow and this low lighting. They look very similar. And the hologram on the left looks a lot like an Iktachi, like the Jedi Saucy Tin, who sat on the Jedi Council in Attack of the Clones. And then Andor immediately gets hassled by company men.
Excuse me. We were at first.
English always get pissy when you skip a cue. Now, personally, I expected Andor to be on some rebel mission in this first scene, like when we met him in Rogue One, but it turns out that this mission is personal, because there's not even a rebellion yet for him to serve. Again, this is something that I am loving about this series, that we are seeing the slow burn of the rebellion being formed. So when the guys jump him in the corridor, this is by far the most realistic fight I've ever seen in Star Wars. It's nasty. It's not elegant or well choreographed. It's how you win a street fight. Throat punch and then get on top of someone.
You been in a lot of fights?
2, and I learned what not to do.
What's that?
I learned to not get into a fight. This whole opening, this unfortunate accidental murder, really is something new in Star Wars. It's more like the beginning of a Michael Douglas thriller from the 80s or 90s, like the sexual harassment erotic thriller Disclosure that ended with a fight inside a virtual reality.
That was a weird movie.
Yes, it was. Now, if Cassian were a rich person with means, then this whole murder would be swept under the rug for him. Instead, the system is going to relentlessly pursue him. When Cassian flees, his ship has engines that look like a Y-wing, and then he goes to Ferrix, a planet that's in the metaphorical orbit of the Morlani Corporation, but is a free trade sector, meaning that this planet is a little wilder and not as tightly controlled by the company. The droid's name is B2 Emo.
They called her an emo.
And it looks like he was designed after the robots in the 1980s movie The Black Hole, which at the time was supposed to be Disney's answer to Star Wars.
Vincent's my name, sharpshooting's my game.
B2 zaps this space dog, a lot like R2 would have. And this whole sequence of a droid in a junkyard evokes memories of the best Pixar film, WALL-E.
Wow.
And this ship looks like an escape pod from a ship like the Tantive IV. Now, one thing you'll notice a lot in this series is that a lot of the props are taken from the 1980s, when this era of Star Wars was first being put on screen. Like this cooler. That's from the 80s, I remember. And then we flash back to Cassian's childhood on Kenari, another slow burn where the show takes a while to reveal its real purpose. So I'm going to talk about all that Kenari stuff and how it ties into the present day story a little later in the video, because it's in segments and it's hard to talk about it in pieces. I will say that this first episode begins with Cassian looking for his sister, and it ends with what is likely the last time he sees his sister. Now, I am loving how grounded this series feels, with details like how all the workers get their gloves like they're punching a time card. Now, back on the main planet, Morlana, we meet Cyril Karn. Cyril is the kind of idealistic, well-meaning idiot that forms the backbone of dictatorships because of his blind devotion to law and order.
2 minutes, dead sir. Employees, that's not worth staying up for, then I'm not worthy of the uniform.
But guys like him often become disillusioned with regimes and end up working for the other side, like Agent Callus in Rebels. We've already seen Cyril disobey orders to do what he thinks is right, and I think that by the end of the series he might be recruited to join the rebellion. Much like Lieutenant Daniels, he resists orders to juke the stats.
Tell the mayor his debts will be clean.
The monitors in the security office are all old-fashioned televisions with a 4:3 aspect ratio, again, using material that they would have had on hand in the 70s and 80s. When Cassian goes to see his friend Bix Colleen, these Arabesh letters tells us that she works at a shop that works on power conversion. It's actually kind of hard to tell because the Arabesh letters are a bit smudged. The owner, Tim Carlo, is at the counter speaking to what looks like a whippet, but they're usually more hairy than this.
Whippet good.
Cassian's trying to sell a
traceable NS9 Starpath unit. Vector crystals and Imperial seals still intact.
Which is basically a piece of Imperial hardware that lets you access Imperial hyperspace routes, and other Imperial ships will read you as one of their own. It's a very handy device if you're smuggling or if you're starting a rebellion. Carlo comes out and asks,
"Are we betting on the Wobani run tomorrow?"
Now, Wobani is the detention planet filled with labor camps. We saw it in Rogue One. Jyn Erso was held there in a labor camp before being broken out by the Alliance. The Arabesh letters here spell out Kayleen, as in his friend, Bix Kayleen, meaning this is like her particular garage. And back on Morlana 1, the company comps are looking at a vector map like we saw often in the original trilogy, as Cyril is closing in on Andor. Meanwhile, Andor is getting shaken down for cash in front of a shop with Arabesh letters saying that here they sell screens. So, Bix is a smuggler, which would be a profitable trade on a world that is lightly patrolled by corporate security. She's like Red in the Shawshank Redemption.
She's the woman who can get it for you.
Exactly. So we see her walk past a gonk droid, like this one that's getting tortured, into a hidden communicator and a smokestack, and this is exactly the kind of underground communication devices that built the rebellion. In Rebels, we learned that Ahsoka Tano helped to build an early rebel network on a communications channel called Fulcrum, which was actually Anakin's private channel in the Clone Wars.
Sir, we've received a transmission from someone using your subspace frequency, Fulcrum.
And here's a little more Arabesh for you. This one says droid parts, service, and this shop she goes into reads Repa, probably short for repairs. And the episode ends with Cassian trying to cover his tracks as the security forces are closing in. Now, on to episode 2. Episode 2 opens in the present day with a very cool scene. A bell ringer who strikes particular parts of this metal to create different tones, and he treats this job like it's some kind of ancient craft. Now, these bell ringer jobs did exist for hundreds of years during the Middle Ages, and Star Wars is at its best when it combines these ancient practices with like sci-fi gadgets. It's also telling that this is done by a human and not by a droid, because this community is like far too working class to have extra jobs around for jobs like bell ringer. At the airfield, these scavenger birds look a lot like the practical puppets built for similar creatures in The Force Awakens. Now, when Carlo reads this Arabesh screen, the writing reads,
person.
Hang on, Doug, I'm about to translate something.
Person.
What?
The show already translated that for you.
Oh, thanks. Stupid show. Then Cassian goes to the home he shares with his surrogate mother, Marva Andor, who probably gave the orphaned Cassian her last name. She is played by Fiona Shaw, that's Aunt Petunia from the Harry Potter movies. Later, she goes into Cassian's room, which contains a couple pieces of his childhood, his blowgun and a toy bantha. Also, look at this. That is a repurposed kerosene heater like the one we had when I was a kid. That's weird. I actually can't remember anything about when I was a kid, except the movies and the TV shows and that heater. That heater.
Hey, is there more Arabesh?
Yes, there is. So let us translate that for you. This reads insert credits. So this is Carlo using a payphone to rat out Cassian over a woman. A woman! And on the other end, the report says, actually, you know what, they read it for us.
Insurrection, destruction of Imperial property, assault on an Imperial soldier.
So Cassian already has a criminal record. He was in Imperial detention and now he's laying low from the authorities. Then we meet Sergeant Linus Mosk, played by Alex Ferns. He played Commissioner Pete Savage in The Batman. He calls Ferrix
affiliated planets.
And this helps us understand how this particular government is organized. The company controls Morlana, but they also loosely oversee nearby planets like Ferrix, and they all pay homage to the Empire. It's kind of like fiefdoms in the Middle Ages being ruled by a lord, and then that lord pays taxes to the crown. Now, Mosk is no idiot, and even he can see that there is a rebellion beginning to stir in the galaxy.
There's fermenting out there, sir. Pockets of fermenting.
Back on Ferrix, Cassian is using an LED lantern that, guess what, you can buy at Walmart, and he's prepping to flee the planet while his buyer is arriving. And then we see his buyer is Luthen Rael, played by Eric Selvig himself, Stellan Skarsgård. So in the trailers, we saw that Luthen has contacts very high up in the government, and even appears to have been an aristocrat or a politician at some point. Now he could be one of the early founders of the Alliance to Restore the Republic. So he's on Ferrix, and gives us a classic Star Wars POV binocular shot, while back in town, Bix wakes up and says,
Tell me of Caf.
Now, Caf is a caffeinated coffee drink in the Star Wars universe. I've read it in the books for years, but I don't think it's actually ever been said in live action. Next, Cassian goes to try to book passage off-world, and this sign reads Zanwans. That's the name of the guy that he tries to book a ride with. Now, their conversation where they negotiate for passage with discretion.
What would we be picking up?
Give me the price for not knowing.
Is an awful lot like Obi-Wan negotiating with Han Solo.
What is it, some kind of local trouble?
Let's just say we'd like to avoid any Imperial entanglements.
You'll notice this patch on Zanwan's vest. It's a hexagon.
Not the beast! But what does the patch mean?
Well, look, the Star Wars Galaxy's labor force is organized into different guilds, like they did in medieval times.
Like the Bounty Hunter Guild and the Mandalorian.
They just don't want to pay guild rates.
Exactly. So, to work in a trade, you need to apprentice to earn your crest. I suspect this is why Bix has a patch on her jacket, and this guy's patch marks him as a guild pilot. But, you know what? The corporate buildings are all also shaped like hexagons, so maybe this marks him as a company man. Now, it is interesting that a circle inside of a hexagon is very similar to the symbol of the Confederacy of Independent Systems crest that we saw in the Clone Wars. Maybe planets like Ferrix sided with the Seps, and now the Empire is making them pay an economic price for their rebellion.
Like the reparations the Allies demanded from the Central Powers in the years following the Great War.
Yeah, exactly. How did you know that?
I am so smart.
Yes, you are. And then we end the episode with Luthen having a seemingly random conversation with an old salesman on a transport, but there's a lot of hidden meaning packed into this talk. So he's a salesman talking about how it's a ripoff, so they have to pay the transport fees just to do business. And he mentions how the shuttle is in the air, but in the old days you went by speeder and the taste of ash was always in your mouth.
You make the round trip and taste it a week later.
So this salesman is giving us a picture of what life is like on the ground level for a working man. He's painting a picture of how much harder life has become over the years as the empire has risen to power and people care less and less for the working class. And to punctuate this, he says,
Who knows who you're talking to these days?
Again, the Imperial Security Bureau has spies everywhere.
So why is this so important?
Because, Doug, we are seeing what first led people to rebel against the Empire. The rebellion wasn't started by generals or Jedi Knights. It was started by regular people who were tired of being kicked around. And he finally gives us this line.
If you can't find it here, it's not worth finding.
And then we smash cut to Cassian Andor, implying that he is exactly what Luthen is looking for. Oh, and also this couple behind him on the ship might be Quarrens, but I don't think they have enough face tentacles. It's kind of hard to see. Now, on to episode 3, and spoilers are ahead for all 3 episodes. Alright, so episode 3 is when the young Cassian flashbacks really start to parallel with the present day, and where I think they begin to foreshadow what's coming next. The flashbacks in episodes 1 and 2 kind of play like a live-action WALL-E with no translatable dialogue to tell us what's going on. We have to gather information from context that we slowly piece together. From what I can tell, this was once a Republic mining facility. The official cover story is that it was destroyed by a disaster.
Kenari, mid-rim. Abandoned after Imperial mining disaster.
So I think this disaster released a toxin in the air that killed all of the adults, but the kids' immune systems learned to adapt. This is why the Seps and Marva are all wearing oxygen masks. But the Republic never came back for the kids, probably because the air was too dangerous. So Cassian grew up neglected and forgotten by his government. Later, Luthien says,
Take me up Briggs Road and hang me in the square. Wouldn't be the first time, would it? Isn't that where they hung your father?
But I think he was talking about his adopted dad, the man who was with Marva in the flashback. In the flashback, these guys are wearing the patches of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, but Marva also says that Cassian's people killed a Republic trooper, but they killed a Sep trooper, so I'm not sure what that means. Could just be that she made a mistake. Anyways, the mine was abandoned, and the kids had to form their own society, like Lord of the Flies or those kids in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Notice the kids are wearing oversized clothes that probably belong to the adults. There's some part of this story left to tell about what happened to these people and why the Separatists were in orbit and were shot down. Then this stupid Sep shoots their leader. Afterwards, Cassian makes the most important choice of his life. He goes into the ship. Inside, he finds that the sight of his own reflection makes him angry. Maybe he blames himself for what happened to his family, or he can't believe that he's aged so much. His tantrum brings him to the attention of Marva, who is smuggling with her shiny new droid, B2 Emo. So I loved how well they intercut the flashbacks with the present-day storyline. We go from
Republic frigate approaching.
Straight to the cops on their way on the planet. Meeting Luthien is intercut with his first meeting with Marva, who then goes straight into Marva present day. And the episode ends with him leaving his home with Marva in the past, intercutting with him leaving Marva in his adopted home in the present. In both timelines, he's being led away by a soldier mentor figure who's going to completely change his way of life. And by the way, the ship that he's on at the end as a kid is the same one where he sleeps and stores his gear in present day. The only difference is they gutted it for parts and the front seats are missing. And when Luthien gets off the ship, there's a droid with the body of a protocol droid right here. As we see authorities chase Cassian in two timelines, the corporate cops are able to land in the middle of the city. A neat contrast to Luthien and the old man, who had to park far away because they couldn't afford to pay for better spots. This deconstruction yard looks like they're disassembling AT-ATs, judging by these giant legs in the background. Or these are giant cranes that use the same engineering base as those military vehicles. So the device Cassian is selling looks like it could have come straight off the Death Star. The buttons and design fit in perfectly with the original trilogy design aesthetic. Then Cassian and Luthien have a conversation that really strikes to the heart of this series.
They can't imagine it, that someone like me would ever get inside their house, walk their floors, spit in their food, take their gear.
The Imperials always think that they're above the Proles, and always underestimate the common man, just like in the original trilogy where they constantly underestimated the rebels.
Should I have your ship standing by?
Evacuate? In our moment of triumph? I think you overestimate their chances.
So when the cops land, we see this lawless town get to work. Like Luthien hinted at, these authorities have hanged people in this town before, so there's a lot of resentment toward the corporate police. Everyone starts banging on stuff like a call to arms, and this was foreshadowed by the hammer swinger last episode. The cops think this is intimidation, but it's really communication, and much more secure than Cassian's comlink. Arabesh here says droid parts, and this sign says freight. And then we have a gritty fight in the hallway, which is pretty great, and the idiot who ratted out Cassian dies.
Woman!
Right here we get a quick look at the space version of the tracksuit mafia from Hawkeye. So it turns out that Luthien was just trying to recruit Cassian, and the product that he has is secondary. We already see him begin to train him, telling him the rules.
Rule number 1. Never carry anything you don't control.
And later he says to kill Cyril without mercy, just like years later we'll see Cassian kill a fellow rebel who's injured just to keep him from talking.
Calm down. Calm down. We'll be all right.
Then the locals rise up against the police, even tying a tow cable to one of the cop ships, which seemed like an homage to George Lucas's breakout hit, American Graffiti. Luthien set up a decoy bomb in a speeder, which is a terrorist tactic. Now that's interesting because at this point, the rebellion doesn't really know what it is. Partisans like Saw Gerrera were much more violent and extreme than the more cautious Senate leaders like Mon Mothma and Bail Organa.
Saw Gerrera, his band of fanatics.
So in these early stages, the rebels might take on tactics like this before the organization forms a unified command structure. Also, Stellan Skarsgård whistles for his ship, like a horse.
Space Western.
As young Cassian is taken away, this dream catcher of Marvis seems to hold a kyber crystal. Now we've already seen some people, like Jyn Erso, wear these crystals as totems to bring them good fortune through the Force.
Actually, Jyn Erso wore the kyber crystal to honor her father and had no belief in the Force.
Yeah, I know that's why Jyn Erso wore the kyber crystal. It's just that, like, you know, other people would wear kyber crystals for different, more sentimental, superstitious reasons.
Well, you just made me feel terrible about myself.
Go away. So these first 3 episodes of Andor are unlike any Star Wars I have ever seen. There's no mention of the Force, no swashbuckling action, everybody's really poor and really sad, and the Empire has just made the galaxy miserable. And I'm not mad about that. We know how this story ends, so the narrative driving question is going to be, how did we get there? We're going to see the unrest that formed the rebellion at the top of society and at the economic bottom. The main story paralleled the life of young Cassian, showing how people are discarded by the mainstream society and fall into a life of violent crime, even when they're acting out of self-defense. So this show is going to show us a new side of the Star Wars galaxy, but it might also be a reflection of us and the times that we live in. But like, with lasers and stuff.
Pew pew!
That's all the Easter eggs we found, but if you found any, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, be sure to subscribe and smash the bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Arey.